Sometimes you look at the game and no matter how hard you try, you see more than just a game. Maybe it's just me, but we'll get to my crazy peels later. Good morning, you beautiful ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the newest episode of Ducky Games, a video game show about video games. And no PR fuzz allowed in our pillow fort. No matter how hard you try to make a statement with buying or not buying the game, in the end you are left with nothing more than a gameplay, story, music, and all of that creates an unforgettable experience. Well, at least sometimes. Sometimes you play the game and think to yourself, why did I even bother? And that is a good question to ask yourself, eventually. Because today I have decided to touch on a topic of games that leave a mark on us. Be it a good mark because you did everything you could and saved everyone, or a bad mark because you have committed something you didn't want to, but you had to. Doesn't matter really, the games can be more than just graphics, sound and interactivity. And as I usually call it, having or lacking soul. Quite a sensitive subject, but I promise it is sensible. And it will have to interconnect with the weird functions of the human mind. Creepy, isn't it? Well, let's try and dig into the basics of the soul of the game. First of all, not a single person will deny that every annual Call of Duty and FIFA installments are soulless as hell beneath the hell itself. I hope we do agree on this one. If you think otherwise, please don't get near me. I know you are deranged or something. Just please rethink everything you did and every decision you made because you are wrong and should be ashamed of yourself. But what games can we say have souls really? Mario games? Maybe, possibly, not entirely sure. Who can really tell? Does Q*bert have a soul? Do cinematic PlayStation titles have one? Dark Souls have a lot of souls in them, that's for sure. I had to do it, you know I had to do it and I have no regrets. Anyway, there is an experience you have with the game sometimes that you feel comfortable with, that you come back to play it like you're coming back to your old friend. The feeling when you don't just know how the grinding works, but you know the imperfections too. You know how game is good, you know how game is bad, and you love both of those parts. And not just exploits that help you win it, the bugs that you have to dance around to have fun, and the fun you're having dancing around said bugs. Yes, some people can't have that feeling because they're hell-bent on winning every game, getting every achievement, even visual novellas and Microsoft Flight Simulator. Yes, there are people who want to win those, and they are fine. It's fine. They have fun like that. They have their own fun, let them have their own fun. But I had to mention that those people will not really know what we are going to talk about because their experience with the game is focused on a whole different things that sometimes overlap with something we talk about, but not always. Anyway, enough of the preface, let's talk about games with souls by first mentioning the games without souls. Yes, again. Corporations are trying their hardest to get people who don't care about the project and make a project that feels like somebody cared. But usually you can tell that the game was done by the corporate standards. It's quite easy nowadays. The only single outstanding feature of the whole game is visuals. That's the most corporate thing to do because corporations need to measure everything. Measure readiness of the game by the amount of tasks left in the tracker. Measure how much a new game is better than some other game just by comparing something everyone can see. Graphics. Story, not as much. Not every person will even care about the story. Not every person will see the ending of the story. Sound design, who can hear the difference between 44.1 kHz and 48 kHz? Gameplay, what the hell is even that? We had playtests and they show a good retention from the players from the target demographics. What about the gameplay you're talking about? I have no idea. And the most important part, can we sell it for a huge profit? Okay, what part of that list there could have been named a soul? Nothing. Not a single thing recited could have been named a soul in the game. The whole idea is not to make a product good or fun to play or memorable. The whole idea is to wow you into buying the game with visuals, make you pay more to have better experience in the game, and make a product that will be likable for the majority of the public that has some interest in video games. Be that players, their parents, or people who have to deal with both. How can we make a great project when everything you are focused on does not include something you would have wanted to enjoy yourself? Yes, the easiest way to make a game with the soul is to start making something you wanted to play. You need a proper football game? Make one yourself. Make it without the loot boxes and all with the proper physics. People who make games like that usually make something memorable, or even great. That was the reason Doom happened, Quake happened, well, maybe not the latter. The latter was more of a kid raised by parents who were constantly in divorce process. But anyway, kid turned out to be fine. I'm still grateful. Blizzard made games that were so good because they made something they themselves wanted to play. BioWare made great RPGs because they wanted to tell an epic story about the world they created. None of them wanted to make a nice revenue for the shareholders, and none of them wanted to make something that will keep generating the profit for years. They managed to make it, but they started with something else. And that is where you should start looking as well. Grab some good story, good enough that will complement whatever the hell you want to play. Get some nice looking visuals. You don't need the best visuals. People who generally love good stories and gameplay usually disregard visuals, for they are secondary to everything else. And people who want the best graphics with over-the-top bloom and HDR usually disregard everything else, including the story. So don't waste resources on the best visuals, just make them as good as you want them to be. Add some really nice audio. It's quite easy with all those sound libraries available around. And if you're getting music as well, just make it so that your music is always there and never out of place. It's always confusing when the music was happening. You got used to the music and suddenly you are in the complete silence, not even the ambience. Just make sure the music is always there if you're trying to make a music, okay? Don't forget some gameplay. Make something that makes you smile and come back for more. Test it on your friends. If they ask how to play this Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, you might be making yet another JRPG. And you need to stop and rethink this. Don't let your nostalgic feelings cloud your judgment of what fun gameplay is. No, seriously. Even Square Enix decided that spreadsheet combat is outdated. Don't try to bring it back. Make something more engaging. It is time. The time has come. Evolve. And after you complete all of that, does your game have soul? Honestly, I have no idea. No, seriously. The soul appears in the game when people working on it want it to be their experience and their fun. It happens when people willingly or unwillingly add extra layers to the game and make decisions based on the vision of the game. If you don't have the vision of what you want to play, you will get just another game of the genre. If your vision is never changed no matter what, you're going to make something that is not that much fun to play. But when people care enough about the experience, they make so much that they, willingly or not, mind you, add an extra layer of the depth of the game. The game becomes more than just a sum of its components. For the reasons of clarity, let me say that being more than the sum of its parts for developers does not get into the equation, only for the players. Because we all know that there are games like Fez, Braid, and other wonderful beings that are very dear to those respective developers, while being just a fun indie platform and for others. They are in superposition. We can assume they have a soul and we cannot prove or disprove it. So chill down with those. They're Schrodinger's games. And that is the problem. If your project is way too cryptic and way too complicated for a single person to understand, you are left with the misery of the creator who was never understood. Take Braid, whose creator claims that not a single player nor analyst understood the true meaning of the game. Or take Kojima, who made Death Stranding, and even he himself cannot explain what the hell he wanted to say with it. What is happening and why? We may never know the real answer. But do we really care? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Your mileage may vary. But saving enough space for the game to have fan theories and such is fine. You don't need to explain the trade routes of tritium pirates for people to enjoy your space game. Witcher has some really nice soul in it. It leaves you with more experience than just go and hunt monsters. You get to learn about the world, you get to be the judge of some people. You get to be that one drunkard in the inn. A lot of world and character-defining moments are interlinked with the narrative of the game, and it's a very good thing to have. It's a very good thing to have that cannot be replicated by typical corporate way of producing the game. Because what corporation in their right mind would include mandatory getting drunk before achieving some quest? No, seriously. Intoxicating yourself just for the sake of quest. That's something. And yeah, I know you can remind me of GTA and such, but the whole reason of the GTA was to experience all the low life of the city. Prostitution, drugs, other substances abuse, crimes, and so on and so forth. That's the whole experience. It's not something extra. Anyway, how do I know that corporations cannot replicate the soul? Cyberpunk 2077. It tried really hard to be The Witcher, and it failed. It failed mostly because there were people working on the narrative and side quests, but they did not talk to each other. They didn't communicate at all, or they didn't communicate enough to make the whole narrative an experience. Well, I mean, they did communications by management who made sure everything is included in the final build, and we got some torn narrative pieces that are barely stitched together, and the game could have had some soul, but it was dead on arrival, so the soul is not there anymore. You can never try to reinstate the soul in the dead cadaver. It's like trying to reanimate a living person that died. We all know it's not very good, we all saw zombie movies and such. Interestingly enough, Morrowind has a soul and System Shock had one. Also, System Shock was one hell of an experience, but we might get to it after the release of System Shock Remastered. Just leave me some message if you want this to happen, okay? So the real question after we know what the soul is, can you fake it? If you are a corporation that wants to make a game that will feel like it has a soul and you don't want to take risks, I imagine it would have been a wet dream for people from EA. Making games profitable forever and making people dream about their games. Technically, you can do that, but you will always have to take risky decisions. And if you are not prepared, there will be something that does not fit the experience in your game. It's like wanting a cake and eating it too. It's not possible. Take Fallout 1 and 2 for example. It would never have worked without a lot of murder, mutants and slavery. What corporation in their right mind would decide, you know what, we need our AAA game. And everybody's like, okay, what do we have to do? The character can be a slave trader there. There. Insta regret. No corporation would have done that. But how can you make a free roam experience RPG without allowing the player to join every faction ever? Wanna join slavers? Of course you can. Wanna join the ones who fight slavers? Of course you can. Wanna kill both? Of course you can. No corporation would do that. That's too much of a risk. Now it's about time for me to make everyone hate me, especially people who did not want to go and explore better games and never tried any indie games in their life. But hear me out before writing me an angry email to mrangryducky@docracy.com, okay? I will get to my point after I anger all of you. People try to mimic having a soul in the game, and this is the reason we have games like Deus Ex Human Revolution, where corporate security and the SWAT teams are worried that you killed a national terrorist, and not worried that the said terrorist killed their friends and people at the object they were supposed to protect. Not very true to life, isn't it? Or take Dishonored, where killing people is a big no-no, but the game tries to tell you that, oh, it's just the choice you make and nothing more. Yes, the choice to win at the game or to lose it. Because who cares that some of the people are evil and they want to see the world burn? We cannot hurt them. Who cares if some of them are facing fate worse than death after you are done with them? Who cares? But hey, you did not kill them, so everything is rainbows and unicorns. Sounds a little bit dumb, isn't it? Or Bioshock Infinite, where nothing really happens and everything you do is meaningless. It is meaningless so much so that it gets undone in the end of the game. What a way to value your time and experience. And I know there are a lot of people who are already very angry at me for calling their favorite games soulless creations, and I can admit it, your mileage may vary. You may have something going on with those titles, but just as you are not going to accept the next Call of Duty being a visual novel instead of the multiplayer shooter, contradictions between the story and the world of the game should not be tolerated either. Because if developers did not care enough to make sure in the story there are no white spaces that irritate players, how can we say that they walked an extra mile to add more depth to the game? Who in their right mind will neglect world building and story in such a way and leave it in such disrepair and still say they really care about the final product? No, it's the corporation, it's the deadlines, it's anything but the final vision of the product. I mean, sure, we can always say something to explain that, and it will not be something bad, but why would you do that? Either way, you have a story that feels like it was neglected, like it was the afterthought, like the story was developed outside of the whole project. Maybe even the story was developed fully and then chopped into pieces to include only the pretty pieces and throw out every pieces that explain something in between them. Anyway, let's get it concluded. Yes, the project, every game project should have a dominant vision of the finished product. If the dominant vision includes that you have to be pacifist and never kill anybody, build a world around it. If the vision includes you being the massacre madness guy, killing every single person you encounter, allow it. Build around it. Build around the vision, not around making less risky product. This is why I usually look into the indie developers scene, and more often than not, don't even try the big budget AAA project. They did not change a lot since the PS3 era. It's mostly the same sorry excuse for the story and not a single fresh idea in the gameplay. I think we all know by now that big developers can neglect huge parts of the stories and gameplay to not pay more for the level design or PR that will make sure the game and the developer are not cancelled by Twitter crowd. There are a lot of expenses, or rather risks, that big corporations cannot afford because they're big corporations. But indie developers gladly take those risks because the reward is usually something they want to play themselves. And if the game becomes something people love and enjoy, they win. Nobody will take the same standards they take for the AAA project for the indie project. Of course, indie projects have a very light critique, but sometimes it's more harsh. But we're not talking about those games. You know, those games. We are talking about the good part of the indie game scene. And I was mentioning the good part of the indie game scene. Although in the indie game there is a big chance to find something that people sloppily slap together, and it is actually a waste of time with bad graphics. That is also true. But if you want to have a good game, you have to take risks, right? You yourself, you have to take risks. You have to try games. So, what really makes the game soulful and soulless? We may never figure it out, but I know one thing for sure. Games with souls are not a perfect experience. It's usually a roller coaster of experience instead of refined and smooth sail. They have a vision, and the vision is usually consists of the good parts of the game and the bad parts of the game, because they have to connect the good parts of the game somehow. You can't have everything fun and the game ended. Speaking from the story point of view, you cannot have a story where you save everybody and you encounter no troubles at all. No regrets for any action hero taken. Everybody is happy, everybody is saved. It's just not a good story. You gotta have the low part. Funny enough, the same could be said for the gameplay as well. You have to have the fun part, the best part of the game, the part where you always smile when it starts. And before this part began and after this part ends, there should be something that will make this part stand out. There should be something that is less fun, that is more tedious. Usually it's some kind of resource collection, or maybe just moving around the place to the place where the fun begins. It is something. There is always something in between the fun gameplay. It usually helps you, the player, catch your breath, stretch your fingers, stretch your arms, and say, let's get on with it. And you will get on with the fun. Otherwise, if you didn't have the time to do that, it would not be the same experience. It would not have been the fun you had. It's not a smooth experience. It's not refined. If you take your game that is a refined experience, I'm sad to say that it's a soulless creation. Take CSGO, a refined Counter-Strike experience, and it has no soul. Valorant, same real. Quake 3, quite soulless. It's just refined multiplayer experience. There can be still fun to play multiplayer. Multiplayer games are gaining something when they are soulless and refined experience. It's fine. It's fine to like that. Any Assassin's Creed release nowadays is also soulless, but it doesn't mean they're good. And it doesn't mean that every sloppy game will have soul. Absolutely no. Gods no. Take Duke Nukem Forever, for example. Take Call of Cthulhu: The Dark Corners of the Earth, the aforementioned Cyberpunk 2077. There are several games that are sloppy, but they lack the soul because they're not the single product. Instead, they're just a sum of their own parts. You don't see the vision behind that. You cannot relate to that vision. The game with soul should have the creative process hidden behind those imperfections. Creative process requires the story to have high and low points, just like with the gameplay, just like with the music. The whole game should have high points and low points. And mind you that the constant high point game is not possible. It's not going to be like Tetris on the 9th speed. I mean, fun but finished in under a minute. Just don't forget, soul in the game does not mean it's a good game. As well as having no soul does not mean the game is bad. It does not correlate. One does not cause the other. So please, don't mess those up. So the real question is, why do you even want to strive for the soul? Why bother? Well, mostly when people remember things. People don't remember things very well. People remember how they felt during the process. And if you grant the experience that has soul, people may remember something that was not in the game. They may remember something they read in the wiki. They may remember something that's worth replaying. They will replay your game several times. It's not just because the matchmaking is there and everybody is playing that. No, they will replay because they want the experience. They want more of that experience. They want to remember the good parts. They want to get better at the bad parts. They will want your game after it's re-released in the emulation, after it's on eBay only, after you forgot that you have created the game. Players will remember, you will have the fan base. And for that, you will strive to create the game with the soul. Or maybe not. I don't know, I'm not your boss. Probably your boss is from the EA, and you will strive to create something cheap and something that will generate huge profit. Well, after all, you may disagree with me on some things there. I have tried to make sure you and I are on the same level discussing the souls in games. If you think I should have mentioned one of the games you really enjoyed, make sure to write to me in the email mrangryducky@duckracy.com or poke me on Twitter @ducky_angry, or just join the Discord and post something there. I will leave the link somewhere in the description. There is another option too. If you want to become one of the supporters, you can join Patreon and have at me there. Because the whole thing would not have been possible without beautiful patrons. And that's all I have for you today. See you next time in the next Duckin' Games. As for today, duck off.
By the Emperor and Superior Firepower, Duckin' Games podcast is a part of Geeks Rising Network.